Hello and welcome to Pro Trader Strategies market commentary for Monday, November the 25th. My name's Eric Wilkinson and you sure may recognize me as the Wolfman on mainstream media. But what I'm here to do is not only talk about the economic data and the markets, but talk about how we implement options into our portfolio, because that is the key to success. If you're just going out and buying stocks, you are all one directional. You need the market to go up in order to make money. Well, what happens when the market makes corrections, or even some of our stocks aren't necessarily going straight up? Well, I talk about how we can do dollar cost averaging with options, how to cover some of that risk with that option or that stock portfolio. Also, how to increase yield in our portfolio, get a somewhat of a dividend every single month using these option strategies in your portfolio. That's the best way to increase alpha in your portfolio and also yield. All right, but without further ado, let's talk about the economic data. And it being a Monday, there really isn't anything to talk about necessarily. It's all about these acquisitions and or businesses selling off different aspects of their business. One of the biggest ones everybody's talking about is Charles Schwab trying to buy out TD Ameritrade. And I am going to sneeze. Excuse me. Sorry. That is one of the biggest things that people are talking about, but there's all kinds. Hewlett Packard and Xerox. It does not look like Hewlett Packard wants to buy out Xerox as what was really touted on mainstream media, so we can kind of kick that to the curb. But we are seeing all-time highs in the equities as well. So without further ado, let's talk about the equities and the broader markets. We've got crude oil here pretty much unchanged on the day. That could be made up in a matter of minutes. We're talking 18 cents. But we did go up and test that $59 a barrel, which lines up with my Fibonacci. And we've talked about this. The closer we get to $60 a barrel, we are going to start losing momentum. We need a stronger economy. We need a lot more demand out of the markets in order to come up and test that $60 a barrel, which lines up with the value area high. Anything above that, we need some real manufacturing coming through, and we aren't really seeing that across the pond for sure, which is going to drive demand for crude oil, right? And here in the United States, it's okay, and the United States isn't just enough to drive that. We're also not seeing that demand for the gasoline. The distillates is what goes into the manufacturing sector. But again, we did go up, test that $59 a barrel, which lines up with the 38 Fibonacci here. Failed on that and then settled below $58 a barrel, which lines up with this Fibonacci. Now that's where we were seeing resistance on the way up. Well, settling below that, it's still acting as resistance. So today, went again up and tested that and are seeing the market really kind of pull back a little bit. I've expected the market to come back down in and around this $55 a barrel area and fill in some of this low volume area. We haven't really seen that yet. Market's still driving higher, but that's, we're in a trend, and to get outside of that little trend channel there and test where I am talking about, we need some bearishness to come in, but those bulls are really fighting hard in crude oil. Now gold, we've talked about this. I was expecting a little bit higher pricing in gold futures here. That $14.50 area here in gold futures is holding as a support. I think that the bulls are going to seriously defend that area with the weaker dollar. The FOMC here in the United States going through with some quantitative easing, even though they're not calling it quantitative easing, it really is. That has been supported right there at that $14.50, and a weaker dollar should cause gold to start moving higher. Then we move over to the bonds. They are trying to trudge and get back into that 160. We are currently there. We settled outside of that area on Friday, but again, 160 is the sweet spot that I've talked about. That's where I think that interest rates are going to remain, so that 160 handle is something key to keep an eye on. We do have the VIX coming off, and that's not really surprising because we are seeing equities really drive higher. We've got the Dow Jones Industrial Average up almost 150 points today. We are very near the highs right now as we speak. You can see it's not an all-time high in the Dow Jones. We move over to the NASDAQ, and I believe at this point when we take off the overnight, we can see that we do have an all-time high in the day session. And that's what you're going to see on mainstream media. And when they talk about all-time highs, they are going to discount what happens overnight. And the Main Street is going to discount that as well. They like to print those all-time highs from overnight in the day session. But most chartists and real money pros are not really going to take into account what happened overnight. Why? Because that's not really what happened in the stocks. The stocks don't really trade overnight either. Those are futures, and the futures reflect what is expected going forward in the real indexes, okay? And those indexes are driven by what's being really traded in a stock. So overnight, those stocks aren't trading. It's just a guesstimation as to where those stocks will be. The day session really talks about the highs and the lows that these stocks are experiencing, and that is reflective in what happens in the day session. So keep that in mind when you're charting and everything else, and mainstream media is talking about it. We do have an overnight of 83.79. I would expect that to be printed before we see any real rollover in equities. Now, the E-mini S&Ps, we can pull off that day chart there as well, or take off the overnight session. You can see we got that print 31.31. That is an all-time high for the E-mini S&Ps on the day session, which is reflective again of the stocks that are being traded on the market. So the overnight is reflective of what is expected going forward, because that is a future. We got to discount that. We got a 1.5 to move higher in order to encapsulate what we saw in the overnight session. All right, let's look over at the E-mini S&Ps on the 30-minute chart. Gray section is overnight. The day session is the black. So you can see here that overnight print of 31.32.5 was printed in an overnight session. We saw some sell-off there. Now, I've talked about it. We do have a little bit of a gap there. This is going to want to be printed during the day session. So we very well may see that happen today before we see any other type of rollover happening in the equities. All right, so I haven't added anything to my portfolio, but I did want to talk about eBay. It had a massive move right up to the point of where I am long in eBay. Remember, I'm long 37s in eBay. What happened today was they announced that they were selling StubHub to Viagogo, and that was for a $4 million deal. Now, eBay only bought StubHub for like $3.4 billion, not quite a while ago actually. And the person who started Viagogo, which is basically the StubHub of anywhere else outside of the United States, the person who started that is actually the person who founded StubHub. He sold it off, and then eBay acquired it. He decided to buy that back for $4 billion, which is a 25 times EBITDA, which is a pretty hefty pay up for that. I think that maybe some of his emotions got involved in that investment. But his idea is a global dominance of the ticket, secondhand ticket buying area. So that is looking to go through. We also talked about Xerox and Hewlett Packard. Those are driving the markets, and the TD Ameritrade being bought out by Schwab, which leaves everybody to believe that now we're going to have Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs coming out and looking to buy something like E-Trade or some of these other discount brokerage online companies. So keep your eyes out for that. There's probably a lot of levers and pulleys going on, a lot of stuff happening over the weekend that I didn't even really mention. There's so much going on. But we saw eBay really make a big spike higher off of that sell. I think it was a pretty good sell. It probably is going to help them out. They didn't do a whole lot with StubHub, and that's why I think it's a good sell for them, because I don't think that they concentrate on that enough, and kind of it needs a new fresh drive for that. They just aren't marketing it very well. That's about it. That's all I got for you guys today. I didn't do anything with eBay. I did look at legging in and around this stuff if we got up to that 37 handle, but you can see we came up just shy of that with the market coming up to that 78 Fibonacci and then started losing a little bit of momentum here around that. So we came right back to the point of control. I'm going to be looking for that. That's why I did my strike location, is I thought earlier on that if it came down to that 37, it would kind of hang out there. I expect this market probably to get a little bit of momentum. I think some people did some covering on that. And I'm expecting the market to retrace some of that as we go forward. So I'm not going to do anything with eBay. I'm going to leave on. I'm long at 37. I have on short the 37 calls. So that's where I want to get out on that trade as well. All right, that's about it. That's all I got for you. Other than if you can't take that, take it easy.